These are the last two fully assembled CEN CT cars that I have that need to be gone through. So what I'm going to do is start with this one that I didn't work on last. It's got some missing screws, and if you look at that belt a little more, you can see that it's worn. I decided I am going to keep that pipe on there. I'll just use everything that's on this car that can be used. And just because, I mean, overall it is clean. See, yeah, even that'll come off nicely. I was worried about that. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and go through these cars. I'm not gonna go over it in as much detail because I did that in the previous video on these cars. Built one from scratch and went over details of the instructions as well, so you can refer back to the previous video on that. I'll just kind of come back with updates on these two. Start here, work on this one. Found some old foams, toss these on there. I know earlier I said I was going to test this engine in another car, but I can't be bothered doing that. I'll just keep this all together and replace what needs to be replaced. And then with these two cars here, I'll figure, you know, I can figure something out from that pile. But anyways, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started here. Check back in a little bit. So this car has been reduced to a pile of parts. We'll get it cleaned up because it is kind of old and has that light film of old dust and nitro on it. So we'll get this stuff cleaned up and reassemble it. That chassis cover came right off without leaving any adhesive behind, so that's a big plus. There was a bunch of different random screws and a bunch of screws that were missing, and a bunch of screws that were not the right screws to go where they were. So we'll go ahead and source the right ones and make sure this is together proper after we get the parts cleaned. Check back. So the car is complete. There's a bunch of random mismatched screws in there, and I don't know where those plastic bushings came from. They came from the car, but I have no idea where they fell off when I was disassembling it. It cleaned up real well. I washed the inside of the tank, but I did not scrub the outside. It was pretty clean. I don't know what's going on with this fuel line here. And as you can see, that's a Traxxas carb. The front belt was worn. And there was a 23 tooth pulley here. And I found that with the 23 tooth pulley, the belt was rubbing on the motor mount. So I replaced the belt with this one here, but this one was rubbing as well. So I went ahead and put the 16 tooth, and I had an extra belt. This is my last spare front belt, and it ended up working. So now I just got to clean the engine, install it, and then we'll be ready to add that one to this pile. This car here also has a 23 tooth, but the belt fits in the pulley better. So there's no rubbing at all on the motor mount. The only thing I can see being an issue is if like some sort of rock gets lodged in there. But for now, we've got another roller. Cruising right along. We should get this one done no problem. Have these ready for testing when the good weather comes around. Clean slate, clean canvas. So just looking at my little parts stash, turns out I have an extra 3.3 carb, but it's cracked. I don't remember where this came from or what happened, but it's in good enough condition to use for this purpose. So I'll install that. The coupler has holes in it, so I'm just going to put on a stock pipe. We'll get rid of all this stuff here. Get this stuff installed. And there's another CEN. Another car complete. Clean, original. The diffs feel good. I replaced the clutch. This one seems a little tired. So I had a couple spare and I replaced the clutch. Replaced the carb, replaced the pipe, and the coupler. We should add some zip ties to that. They work without zip ties, just for sense of security, I guess. This one's gonna rip soon. But yeah, so this is another one ready for testing. And if I remember correctly, this actually came with the silver and red Mercedes body. I'll be selling that on eBay soon. Last one. I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this one. I'm just gonna tell you what I'm gonna do and then I'll come back with it complete. But I don't really have to tell you because you already know. Full disassembly, clean, reassembly. And then gather whatever parts needed from this to finish. Shouldn't be many. And then there'll be the last one complete. This is the one that I know of because this is the first one I had and used. So clean this up, check back in. Just figured I'd share how dirty this car actually is, just so you can see before it's clean. It's pretty dirty. I ran it a few times and left all the gunk on it, so I forgot about this mod too, and I didn't know that I changed the steering servo either. So again, I worked on this one years ago and it sat for a while, so yeah, I just wanted to share how dirty it was. Just a quick overview of how dirty the parts are. I already cleaned the chassis because the steering rack was, one of the screws was stripped holding it to the chassis, so I had to torch it off. But yeah, and these are not the stock body posts, and the rears look like they're from the HPI Sport 3 with that flat side. The servos, I'm gonna pull these servos and use them in another car. I think I have some extra stock servos. I'm just gonna return this thing to factory, if you will. So I just gotta finish taking apart the rear end, clean the parts, and then slap them back together. Alright, so all that's left is the shocks and the top chassis. Gotta source some servos from the extra parts. And I actually found a Alright, I got the main chassis and the front end and rear end done. I was kind of going quick with it and I didn't notice that there was a chipped tooth until I had it all together, so I'm just gonna slap this other 2-speed assembly on there. Just swap out the 2-speed. And then I gotta source some servos from the parts, because the servos that came with it I'm gonna repurpose. I'm actually gonna use these in my Jado. I burnt the servos on that, so yeah. So I got the last one done. It needs body posts, front and rear. I gotta put the throttle linkage and the servo saver for the steering on. I swapped the servos back to stock. I swapped the pull start back to stock, and I kept the Traxxas carb. Turns out that the flywheel nut was loose, and I think that's what was causing the engine to have difficulty starting and stay running. So, got that sorted. Also swapped out that chipped tooth gear. I had two, one on this car and one in another 2-speed that was in the stash. So we'll discard those. Oh, I also replaced the header gasket. So we've got another car done. That's good. So I've had enough of these CENs for now. I just rebuilt all of these. So that's 8 total that need to be tested. And I've got these 2 down here that will be tested first. Some of these need to be completed. You can see that these two down here need engines, but we'll deal with that at a later date. For now, I'm going to clean this stuff up and put it away for the warmer weather. I want to get started on building some new stuff. I've got some other projects I want to work on. Yeah, I hope this was helpful for anyone else working on these CT platforms. I went over the whole instruction manual in one of the previous videos, so you can go ahead and check that out. And you'll be seeing these in the future, so stay tuned. But for now, we'll go ahead and get on to some other projects. Thanks for sticking around, checking this out. Thanks for your interest in Nitro. We'll see you in the next one.